Hey everybody, how's everybody doing today? Welcome to my Sunday live stream where we talk about photography and catch up with the community and see how everybody's doing. I hope you're all doing well. I'm doing well, thank you. And wow, it's been kind of a crazy week again, as always. Um, been out shooting a little bit and shopping like crazy, as always. Such a bad case of gas this week, and I wanted to talk about a little bit about lenses today and uh, and some compact cameras. Really, I didn't put that in the title, but it's kind of been what's on my mind. Uh, one of the things I did is in my community page on here on YouTube, I put up a survey about 1.4 lenses because Anthony emailed me and said, 43 Rumors just put out this wild rumor that OM Systems is working on three 1.4 lenses. And I was thinking, wow, that's cool. We need more 1.4 lenses. And then I started looking because the only 1.4 lens I own, I think, is the 25 millimeter Leica, which I love. It's great, and it's not too big and bulky. So it's a nice compromise over the Olympus 1.2 Pro, I think, so that you can get that little bit extra light over, say, the 1.8. And most of them on the used market now cost about the same as the 1.8 lenses. So unless you want weather sealing, then about $100 more. But for the most part, I think it's a great compromise. Uh, Sigma also makes three lenses, and this was my hypothesis, and people think I'm crazy, but if they're really thinking about releasing three new 1.4 lenses, I would argue they're probably going to rebrand the Sigma 16, 30, and 56 1.4s, uh, upgrade the weather sealing, at least certify them if they're not already. So, if they don't already qualify, they're going to officially certify them to IP, whatever that number needs to be, and call it a day. And from that sense, and add a couple $100 or double the whatever they do on pricing, because it is difficult to judge the prices of lenses these days because of inflation. We were kind of used to a very good period, I think, of low inflation pre-pandemic, and since then, it's kind of gone crazy around the world with respect to pricing on everything. And it's just harder to manufacture things and keep costs down low, which trickles into everything camera related. But the sense that I got was that well, let me just show you uh-oh, what's wrong with my loop deck? Hold on. Let me restart the loop deck. I'm going to show you the survey, but basically there were 163 votes, and 48% want more 1.4 options versus, say, wanting more cameras, more new cameras uh, at 31%, and more telephoto zooms, f2.8 was the lowest at 21%, which surprised me. Because I feel like our telephoto zoom range is just a little bit limited. I mean, I know there's a lot of options and there's some great lenses already, so what could they possibly add? But, I'd like to see some very fast telephoto zooms. Maybe like the 40 to 150, we have a 2.8, which is great. Uh, but how about like a 150 to 300 2.8? Something to kind of fill that gap. And I know that would be a huge lens, right? 300 millimeter f2.8. Uh, but if there's a way they could do that without making it so expensive, you know, like keep it under 3 grand. Uh, I I think that would be a lens I would seriously consider for myself because I don't need a huge zoom range. I'm very, very happy with the 300 millimeter f4 prime. Uh, but I don't really have anything fast between 40 and 150. I'd rather have, well, between 150 and 300, I don't have anything fast. I could certainly buy 40 to 150, so I misspoke. But 150 to 300 range, I don't really have anything fast. And I know Panasonic has the 200 millimeter, I forget if it's an f2 or f2.8. They have a very fast prime right in that range. But what's the point of that lens when you have a 300 millimeter f4, right? Uh, from my perspective, I just don't need a 200. So if they came out with, so anyway, let me see if why is this not working? Where's my loop deck? Let me try and start the app manually. If I have to reboot the frickin' computer, I'm not going to do that, but because I'd lose the stream. All right, it's on now, but let me see if I can do it manually. I should have rebooted the computer before I started. Oh, here, it's up now. Okay, so yeah. So here we are, right? Um, you don't need to see me, right? So how do I turn that off? Okay. So here's the poll I put. Do you want more 1.4s? Do you want more new cameras, or do you want telephoto zooms? I was very surprised that people didn't want more new cameras here. That surprised me a lot. I was really expecting more 1.4 options to be the lowest percentage because we have so many great 1.8s. I think just updating the 1.8s to be weather sealed would draw a lot of buyers. And then looking at the comments, it says here the 56 1.4 from Sigma, a 100 1.4, or something in between. That would be kind of interesting. That would be a ginormous lens. What's the reply here? Yeah, look how big the 93.5 is a different beast. But yeah, I would probably be closer to a 100 to 400. And all of the above, but have no money. So you guys can go in and kind of read these. There's a lot of great comments in here. A 12 to 41.8, that would be interesting, or 12 to 100 2.8. We're pretty close there. We have the 12 to 40 2.8 and the 30, the 40 to 150 or the 35 to 100. That would be a tough sell, I think. Uh, let's see. Weather sealed. So weather sealing is a much bigger deal than I ever thought it would be. Because um, I don't go out in the rain much, right? And I'm not like the adventure stereotype that OM Systems tries to put out for their products. So weather sealing to me is not a deal breaker if it has it or doesn't have it. It's just a nice to have for me, but it's not a deal breaker. I'd be content with 1.4 lenses, not weather sealed, if they could make them like $100 cheaper. But because I don't want to pay an extra $100 for a feature that I really wouldn't use. So in any case, um, let me know in the chat section, or you can go right to that poll and leave comments there as well. But let me know what you guys think. Let me take a look at the chat window and see what you guys are saying. See who's here anyway. Oh, I see Marco's here. Jeff Painter, Eric, Wayne Cox. Good to see everyone. Paul Chris, Roger. Good to see you. Roger, I hope you got my email about the tripod. Maybe I'll address that a little bit here. And Zoltan, always good to see you guys. Um, let me see if there's any comments here about the lenses. So Wayne has the 21.4. So we have a lot of lenses already covered, right? We have a 21.4. We have the Sigma 16, 30, and 56. We also have the 25 1.4. And I think that the 12, there's a 12 millimeter 1.4 as well from, Panasonic Leica. Uh, So these, we kind of got the primes covered, and the Sigma lenses are dust splash proof. They have a little rubber gasket around there, so there is some minor degree of weather sealing there. I don't I own the 56, but I've never taken it out, in inclement weather, so I don't know really how it would hold up. But that lens is fabulous. Uh, Believe it or not, though, if you're on an APS-C system, the Viltrox 56, I think it is, 1.7 or 1.8, the one that I just reviewed, that's a phenomenal lens, and I think actually a little better than the Sigma. Smaller and lighter and better, save for the flaring issue. You do have to have a pretty substantial lens hood on it if you want to minimize flaring, or just don't shoot into the sun, you'll be okay. But I think optically it's actually a little better and for like half the price. So if you're on a Fuji or Sony APS-C, the Viltrox 56, I think it's a 1.8, is excellent for like 150 bucks or something. Um, let's see here. There is something here. Almost pre-ordered the Nikon 35 1.4, but got the Voigtlander 1.2 for my ZF, and I'm glad I did. Stellar lens. Yeah. So in the full frame world, 1.4 lenses are everywhere, right? In many different varieties. And then Ed says, I have the Sigma 30 and the Sigma 50. The 30 is not weather sealed, but the 56 is weather sealed. Okay. I was kind of just reading the description from the B&H website, but I didn't look at the lenses individually. But suppose, at least a 56, right? So there's something. You're not alone, Rob. I have gas and lenses, and I bought M43 lens this week. Yeah, I'm very tempted myself for the 21.4 right now, but I have the 25, so I'm like, maybe I should. I bought the 15 millimeter 1.7. The the Leica. I thought I did, and then when I went to my email, it was like, no, you bought a 25 1.4. I was like, oh crap! I've added the wrong lens to my shopping cart. Because you know how KEH is. I was trying to get it from KEH. I put in the lens I want, and then it shows you lenses that are similar if they don't have the one you want. And I accidentally added my dying eyes. I can't see the screen. That I should have wore my glasses while I'm shopping, right? I'll probably make less mistakes. But I called them up and canceled the order. But yeah, I had my heart set on that lens. The problem is it's still like in the 350 to 400 range, used. I'm trying to get it like closer to 300, but prices have gone up again. It's stressing me that used prices continue to go up. Like the frickin' because I was shopping the Leica D-Lux 8. I was like, there's so many better options for less money. Let me see what I can get on the used market that would kind of meet that requirement. But anyway, before I get past the 1.4 lenses, let me finish through the comments. And Roger thinks we need, because you have Roger says I have the 14 to 150 kit lens that I bought as part of the M5 III. Not being a pro, is that lens still good with what we have for software now? We need more non-pro small weather sealed lenses. And this is a great example of people that just want the weather sealing, but they don't need pro, right? So the 14 to 150 is very unique in that sense, right? It's a non-pro lens that's weather sealed. There may be others. Nothing comes to mind off the top of my head, but uh, I think that would be great too, right? Because a lot of us really embrace the Micro Four Thirds ecosystem for what it was originally kind of pushed as, a very small compact system that you can take everywhere. And weather sealing some non-pro lenses would be fantastic, I think, for a lot of people. Because I'm not a I'm a fair weather photographer, but so many people tell me that, it just rains all the time. I don't have, if I want to go out and shoot, odds are it's going to rain or start raining. So I get it. It's, I live in a bubble here where, I the weather's pretty fair most of the time. And when it's raining, I just have to wait a day or two and it stops raining, right? And Roberto says, I want a 14 to 150 Pro. Wow. That would be cool. That would be good. Yeah, I could see that. So that'd be a 28 to 300 equivalent. And Marco, hey Marco, can't sell new lenses without new bodies. No one is going to have faith in the system. That's an interesting perspective, right? If they keep releasing, it's kind of, to me, it's like chicken or egg, right? Do you start cranking out lenses or do you crank out cameras without lenses? So I don't know. You really need to do both, right? Like launch a camera with a new lens together, and then, but they just launched the Mark II. If they had launched a new lens along with it, that would have been better. But I don't know if Home System has the resources, either financially or in, people power, uh, manpower, to execute two new products at once like that, right? They've really kind of cut back in a lot of ways since they were sold off, or even before it, even before Olympus sold to OM Systems, things have been tapering off. And Roger said, yes, weather sealed f1.8 and updated coatings. Keep them small. Definitely. And that's another thing I want to kind of share or talk about is the size of the lenses. The 14 to 150 not that sharp, so a better version would be my dream. Yeah, but this is totally sample variation. Some people are getting great results, and I've seen it. My copy was not that great, so I traded it and just got because I have a 40 to 150 kit and a 14 to 42 kit. So this lens overlapped, and I didn't need the weather sealing, so I sold it and got something else. I don't remember what now, but 17 and then 15 1.4. Yep. So that'd be a 35 and 30. I think the 15 1.7 is good enough, but a 17 1.4, I would love to see that. I would, honestly, I would love to see, I think I put in the comments in that poll, a 14 millimeter f1.4. That would be awesome because I love the 28 millimeter equivalent focal length. And if I could get that in a very fast premium lens, I don't want to pay pro prices, but maybe Panasonic can make one. Now I know they have the 14f 2.5 pancake lens for like $100 used, right? Or maybe two, whatever it is. It's cheap. I'm very, very tempted by that lens because it would make for a really compact system. Pair that with my Pen F. The only thing is, I watched Robin Wong's review on that, and He said the autofocus is the slowest he's ever seen. And for the all intents and purposes that I would use that lens, I think that I'll be fine with that. But it does bother me a little bit that it's gonna be slow to focus because I have missed shots with slow focusing lenses. Um, particularly for street photography, sometimes you gotta be pretty quick, right, to get that shot. And, you could do the whole zone focusing thing, but I would pay more. I would pay, say, up to $500 for a strong 14 millimeter f 1.4, even a 1.8. Well, they have the 15, right? So that's why I was gonna buy the 15. I was gonna buy the 15 1.7 because it's relatively compact, tack sharp, and autofocus is perfectly fine, right? Except in video. Video is gonna be a little slow, but everything else, well, I don't know. Maybe with the newer phase because when I tested that lens, uh, for video, it was on my Pen F. The Pen F is contrast detect, and the autofocus was very, very slow on that camera, for video, and at the time, I cared about that for whatever reason. Now I don't care. I just go out with my the GoPro or not GoPro, but, little action cam for vlogging, and, I'm not worried about getting crisp logging, uh, video. And Roger says, "Thanks for the tripod comment, 16-inch collapse size," so I guess that's a good size unless you know of some one that is 5.4 and collapse is small. I'd have to look around. Uh, 16 inches is really small. That's about as small as I've seen for, any decent sized travel tripod in that price range. Now, if you wanna bump your budget up to, say, $200, there's some nice Sirui carbon fiber travel tripods that are very small, compact, uh, collapse even smaller than that. Uh, they're not gonna be quite as stable because they are small and light, but, for walking around and doing things is perfectly fine, you know? When you need a tripod, you'll get the shot, but you have to be very conscious of the stability. If there's any kind of wind going on or, you know, it's just not as stable mainly because of the size. It's just too small and lightweight, but it will get you the shot. In most situations, it'll be just fine. But I wouldn't do like 30-second, 2-minute exposures on it. You could probably get away with 3-second exposures in calm weather. Um, and Chris says, "I'd love to see a 6 or 7 millimeter prime wide angle lens with autofocus. I had the Laowa 7 millimeter and was not impressed." Oh, interesting. Um, the closest we have is like the Olympus Pro 1.8, 8 millimeter. You have to correct the fisheye in post, but that'll give you pretty wide angle. Close to set. I honestly, it looks wider than 8 millimeters when I use it. Uh, I bet it's because a lot of lenses claim 6 or 7, but then when I actually compared it against my 8 millimeter, the 8 millimeter was still wider. Uh, but and then there's the 9 millimeter Leica 1.7 or 1.8, whatever it is. That's about as close as you're gonna get. So I would say just get the 8 millimeter 1.8. I'm pretty sure it's gonna be just as wide as that 7 millimeter when it's corrected. But it depends on your workflow. The workflow didn't work out for me, ultimately, because I have that lens and I was using it for my architectural stuff, but the workflow of correcting the fisheye perspective in post-processing didn't work for me. Um, and I can do that in the field, right? And it creates a JPEG, but that's okay. It helps me with the composition. I don't know. I just ended up going back to my uh, Panasonic 7 to 14. So Panasonic has the 7 to 14 f4, and that's autofocus and rectilinear. And the only caveat with that lens is the purple flaring, right? So you have to be very co conscious of very bright points of light, like the sun or street lamps. You know, if you're shooting at night, the purple flaring is pretty rough. But I get by. You know, I work around it in my day job, not my day job, but you know, in my photo jobs. I can work around it 99% of the time. But there are shots I have lost some shots in a photo job that I would have liked to have used, say for the purple flaring. I was very, very hard to correct in post. But I'll have to see what I can do with AI now. Maybe AI can fix some of it now. But I've gotten so good at working around that problem that I haven't had a need to go back and fix things with AI, but we'll see. Plato's asking, if I bought the 4150 f4 Pro for my M1 II, would I need to upgrade firmware? I'm on 3.1 currently. Uh, I think you'd only need to update it if you wanted to do focus stacking and things like that. That would be the main thing, but there might be some lens correction stuff. So yeah, I would always update the firmware because firmware, that's normally what but I'll check. I'll check. So you have the EM1 Mark II. So firmware 3.6 added focus stacking to the 40 to 150 f1.4 Pro. And that's all I see. So if you're not doing focus stacking, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. But I'm not I'm not 100% sure about the lens corrections for JPEG files that you take in camera, but certainly when you import the raw images into your photo software, it should have the lens corrections done for you there if you wanted to create JPEGs, you know. But straight out of camera JPEGs, probably it's fine, but I don't know 100% to be honest. But definitely the focus stacking, you have to go up to 3.6. The best place for 8mm fisheye Panasonic is underwater where there's no straight lines. Interesting. So, yeah, I think I I just can't imagine, you know, and this is the problem. Everybody wants what they want, and it's kind of all over the place when I was looking at the comments. Uh, but I honestly, I think after talking with you guys about it here, if they could just update the 1.8s and the 1.7 lenses to be weather sealed, that'd probably satisfy most people. We really don't need 1.4, which would jack up the size of the lenses, add weather sealing, and cost a fortune. I think I think I think that's a great idea. Update the 1.8s with weather sealing so the lenses stay small and light, still bring in plenty of light, and maybe improve the optics or the coatings and crank those out for 400 or 500 bucks a pop. That would be awesome. But tell me what you think. Do you think 1.4 makes a difference between 1.4 and 1.8? I mean, it's two-thirds of a stop. So I get it. If you need two-thirds of a stop more light, you need it. I mean, that's plain and simple. But I think for most of us as enthusiasts, we don't need that two-thirds extra stop of light for anything, right? Um, I think that's a great idea. What do you guys think? Maybe I'll put a poll up later and ask. Uh, and Gordon says, more weatherproof, less expensive, and better compatibility between OM and Panasonic. So I guess I want everything. Yeah. But no, I think Gordon, if we can stick to the 1.8s, they don't have to be super expensive because we can use smaller glass. We can use less glass and just use the most modern coatings for contrast and flaring and all of that. And weather seal them, or at least make them dust splash proof. They don't have to be full on IP, 100, whatever. They could just be dust splash proof, I think, for most of us. But I'm a fair weather photographer, so it's not a deal breaker for me. I don't know. For me, I would probably just buy the 1.8 non-weather sealed. But I think a lot of people, it seems like, would love 1.8 weather sealed lenses. No, you can't remember. I know. I shoot really pretty much at like f4, f5.6 on micro four thirds all the time, except when I need lower ISO. I'm shooting in twilight or something. But for normal daytime shots, man, I'm like very deep depth of field all the time. For all of my paid work, architectural, certainly I'm at f5.6, sometimes f8, but usually f5.6, cuts it. Uh, And, when I'm doing these reviews for the Sony full frame lenses and stuff, they're great lenses, but let me tell you something, those 1.4, 1.8 shots, like I did the 85 millimeter 1.8 last week. Uh, I it that shallow depth of field was driving me nuts personally. I just didn't care for them. Let me see if I'll show you one. Uh, yeah, these, right? I mean, that's just insane. I mean, seriously, how there's no need for that. Like look at this shot here. Wow, that's pretty shallow too. Let's see something more recent. Like look at this. Nice deep depth of field. This was a 35 millimeter full frame lens that I'm reviewing. I can't disclose it. It hasn't been released yet. But this lens, I was shooting it, I think I was like at f5.6, 35 millimeter, because I wanted that deep depth of field. Same thing here. Very deep depth of field. This was also 35 millimeter, like f5.6 on full frame. Uh, and then let's see, these are my fireworks. These were all EM5 Mark III with the kit lens. Yeah, 12 to 32 kit lens. It's just I'm with you, Plato. Most of my shots are going to be like this. Let's see. Those are my pro lenses. Yeah, there's a lot of shots in here because I've been testing lenses. What is this? This is the LX100 Mark II. Okay, this might be a good transition to the other topic I wanted to talk about, and that was my gas for the Leica D-Lux 8. I also put a poll up, not a poll, but I also put a comment up about the Leica D-Lux 8. It's been in my shopping cart for the last 2 days straight, and I came so close to just click buy it now. I put my credit card information in, my 3-digit code, and I was just this close to pushing the button and just getting it. Ah, maybe it'll be out of stock by the time I make my decision. Then I won't be able to get it anywhere, which would be perfectly fine because I don't need that camera. Oh, I tell you. Let's see. Roberto says today my shutter was blinking 1/4000 to 1.8. Yeah, you gotta use a ND filter then, or stop it down. You know, that's what I do. I use a polarizer a lot, and then I have ND filters too. A lot of the shots I did yesterday, I used an ND filter actually. Seriously considering the Leica 10 to 25 and 25 to 50 1.8 zooms. Excellent performance and would replace the primes. Oh yeah, the massive those are big ass those are big lenses, right? Um yeah, if you need 1.7s and you need to be able to zoom in those very tight ranges. I mean, it's not tight relative to Micro Four Thirds because we're talking 20 to 50 and 50 to 100. That's a pretty good range. And to be at a constant f1.7, and those lenses I'm sure are optically perfect, right? And I don't know what they cost though. What are they going for these days? Let me see. 10 to 25. Whoops, I can't get that screen up. Uh, Used about 1150, and brand new about 1500. Wow. How about the 50 to, what was it, 25 to 50? About another 1500. So for between like 2500 and 3 grand, whether you want to buy used or new, uh, I guess, wow, that's a chunk of change. But I guess it would be, if you need it, you need it, right? I mean, think about it. If you're, I'm just imagining you thinking about for video work, where you would throw an ND filter on, keep the lens wide open, because in video you're stuck pretty much at 30th of a second, 60th of a second at base ISO or whatever. It's hard to get the light down sometimes, so you need to throw an ND filter on, but you want to keep that wide open aperture, right, to have a little bit more separation. And Walter's here. Hey, Walter. Should depth of field decision be based on scene and whether we want the background to be part of the story or just a canvas for the subject? Yeah, I mean, it's always a personal choice, right? Some people really prefer that subject separation. And I think, that's a stylistic choice versus I prefer more of an inclusive environmental type shot where you have some context of where the person is. And if I need separation from a if I need the separation, I'll usually do it with light, meaning I'll be very conscious of what's in the background and then use a flash to illuminate the subject and then make sure the background is dark so that there's plenty of separation there in terms of light. If the background might be four stops darker than the subject itself, and that's good enough. But I'm not a pro portrait photographer. I'm talking about portrait photography. But generally speaking, it's a stylistic choice. It's not like one is better than the other. It's just what do you prefer? And I prefer a more environmental shot, more storytelling and context of the environment and details, because and that kind of stems from my professional work in architecture, where I have to present all of the details in one shot. Like if I'm taking a picture of an office space, right? Little things like where are the power outlets? Where's the water fountain? Where are the windows relative to, you know, the the computers and things. So, when I take a picture of an office, I want the client or prospective buyer to be able to make uh, an informed decision about the space, and they need to see a lot of details. Where the steps lead, where's the exit, all of these things I try to capture in one shot. And it's it's 99% of the time I can just walk in and take pictures of two walls here, and I'm done. But I need a very deep depth of field, right? And you know, so when I do my personal photography, I look for details in the scene that would add context to the subject itself, like what details are important, right? And but that's just the way I shoot, right? So I use the 1.8 primes for shooting indoors without flash, usually 17 or 20. Yep. Yeah, you need lots of light indoors. That's what I'm saying. Sometimes you need 1.4, right? I'd rather I've been to some events where I'd rather have, well, you have to be careful though, because even at f2.8 on micro four thirds, I was struggling to get enough depth of field to get two people in focus. They could be standing right next to each other, but one could be just one step back from the other. And at f2.8, this person's out of focus. It's so frustrating. uh, so what I have to do is maybe shoot a little wider and then crop in later, you know, for events where I'm taking pictures of two, three people at a time. It was, ultimately the client was happy with the shots from the event, but I from my point of view, I'm a little inexperienced when it comes to event photography. I was like, damn it, why? I'm on a micro four thirds at f2.8. Why is my depth of field too shallow? But it was an indoor event, so lighting was dark. I was using flash, of course. Yada yada. I mean, it was a freaking learning experience for me dealing with too shallow depth of field when you're shooting two, three people at a time. Uh, a lot of times when you're shooting one person, you want the other person to be out of focus if they're standing right next to them. In that case, going down to 1.8, 1.4 would be awesome. But a lot of times at events, people come as couples. This is my husband, my partner, whatever. And I want them to both be in focus. 2.8 ain't cutting it most of the time at events anyway. And big aperture can also help focusing in darker settings when the exposure aperture is smaller. Yes, that is true. I think it's being less of an issue now that our camera, modern cameras are so good at autofocus now. Um, but that was certainly the case not too long ago where, you throw on a kit lens f3.5 or f4 and the camera, as soon as you get into low light, the camera's going to start to struggle to focus. But I haven't really encountered that issue much now with my more modern cameras where, the lens, I'll put my kit lens on 3.5, f4, and the camera autofocus is fine in low light. But yeah, the more light you can get to the autofocusing layer, the better, definitely. The sweet spot is generally, yeah, that's true. What Walter's referring to is, you have a lens. I think what he's referring to is, let's say you have an f1.4, you want ultimate sharpness, you're going to be two stops darker, which would be f2.8. Oh, Roberta was asking a question. What is the general rule of finding a sweet spot of a lens? Okay, so I'm sorry, you were answering Roberto. Uh, yeah, that's the rule of thumb, two stops, right? So if you're at f2.8, f5.6 should be sharper. You just have to be careful on micro four thirds, or not necessarily just micro four thirds, but any high density pixel sensor camera. Like a 40 megapixel APS-C camera like my Fuji. You have to be careful with diffraction at f8 and higher. Same thing with micro four thirds. Anything beyond f8, diffraction can start to set in. Assuming you want a pixel peep, I shoot at f8, f11 all the time, and it's fine. But if you want the finest details, if you're doing specifically like art reproduction or product photography, and you want the lens to be at its optimal setting, you need to work that out. If you just want to just wing it, just go 2 stops over the lens. But like on a kit lens, if you're at f5.6, 42 millimeters, and the sweet spot is going to be f11, no, that's not going to be the sweet spot. Sweet spot is probably f5.6 on a kit lens across the zoom range. So it's a matter of testing the lenses for yourself, because when we're talking about kit lenses or really any lens, there's enough sample variation out there that you may find a sweet spot not just 2 stops over, right, as a rule of thumb. But don't worry about it, honestly, Robert. Just shoot at f8 or lower, and you're perfectly fine. Don't shoot wide open if you don't have to. Shoot between 1 stop and 2 stops, and you'll be fine. To tell the difference between 1 or 2 stops in a lens in terms of sharpness, you'd have to really pixel peep. And in those cases, it's really only important in applications where it is important, right? Art reproduction, product photography, and probably some other genres, right? Eric says, I may get the LX8 if it's pocketable for cities and museums. I like the fixed lens stops all thoughts of putting a big lens on it. It's either that or GR3. Okay, so let's talk about my D-Lux 8 dilemma here. And I closed that window. Well, all right, so at around $1,600, honestly, I think that's a fair price for that camera. I saw comments where people were saying that camera's not worth half that. And I have to disagree, because for what you're getting, and I get it, people are saying it's a 6-year-old sensor and lens. Just get the LX100 Mark II, and I have an LX100 Mark II. I've been using this for a couple of months on and off. It's on loan from a good friend of mine. If he sells this to me, I probably won't even need to get a D-Lux 8. This would be more than enough. But there's a couple of things about the D-Lux 8 that trump this camera. And one thing that I cannot confirm, but was very interesting when I was looking at some of the features, that I haven't seen anyone else talk about in the reviews. So that's why, like, if I buy the camera, I could review it in a way that I look at cameras, because a lot of the camera reviews I see online, they're just too, they don't really get into actual real world use or things that I care about a lot of times. The closest anybody comes really is probably Chris Nichols, when it comes to talking about cameras and doing camera reviews. But for the most part, the camera reviews I see, and that's why I don't do many, are very different than what I would do with a camera review. Especially something like this, where I have what is essentially the same thing, right? The LX100 Mark II is the same thing as the D-Lux 8 in terms of sensor and lens. Supposedly the processor's been updated, remains to be seen, but I did notice, okay, so the key difference, right? Let me talk about a couple of key differences that no one else has talked about, right? This LX100 II has additional features in it that the D-Lux doesn't have. Focus stacking, the 4K capture mode, and a few other things. But like a lot of specialized features in this camera that are not in the D-Lux 8. The D-Lux 8 is photographically speaking, is bare bones. All it has is like exposure bracketing, but it doesn't have focus bracketing, for example, or the plethora of focus bracketing options that this camera has. That's one. This certainly has more buttons and dials on it. So this is a little bit more tactile in a lot of ways. Um, so I like this better than the Deluxe 8. And I can get this for like $900 to $1,000, basically what it was selling for brand new 6 years ago, which is a thorn in my butt because I don't want to pay brand new price for a 6-year-old camera. So that's why I was looking at the Deluxe 8. So what does the Deluxe 8 have that intrigued me? Okay. One is I like the styling, the cosmetics of it I like better, right? And that's one. Certainly the EVF being sharper, clearer, cleaner, brighter, LCD back on the back, the LCD is brighter, cleaner. Those two things really make a difference in your experience in using the camera in the field. And the fact that it's $1,600, granted, $600 or $700 more than this one, substantial difference. But when you consider you're getting a brand new camera with warranty from Leica, with a Leica badge on it anyway, probably 500 of that $600 is just a Leica badge. Uh, it makes it a much more compelling option over this camera because of the price point. I'm having a hard time justifying $900 or $1,000 for a 6-year-old camera. Like this one I would pay like $900 for all day long because I know who it's coming from and how they take care of their equipment. And I know this is a very good camera. Plus the fact that I've been using it, it's been flawless, right? Versus buying something off eBay or something, or MPB or wherever. But I could get a brand new Leica Deluxe 8 that has, and USB-C. But that's not really enough to spend an extra $500 or $600, right? I'd still probably want to save some money and get this. The other thing that I found was really interesting that no one else really talked about is they talked about it now has DNG files. So I went to DP Review and I downloaded a couple of the DNG RAW files. The other thing I noticed was that the DNG RAW files are typically 30 megabytes. Most of the files off of this camera are around 20 megabytes raw. So why is there, 50% more data in the DNG file when we have the same camera and sensor? I can't figure that out. And unless I take the same exact picture side by side with this camera, I'm not going to be able to, decipher if there really is 50% more data in that file than this one. No one else has talked about that in any review that I've seen. Why is the DNG file 30 megabyte? Maybe the container, doesn't store the data the same way, and that's why it's bigger. It's basically a DNG container versus a proprietary. Maybe it's not compressed, right? Maybe it's an uncompressed RAW. Maybe that's what all it is, because the files out of this are compressed, lossless compressed, 12-bit, data. That could be the only thing. Okay, but there's a difference, right? 20 megabytes versus 30 megabytes could be just that. This is lossless compressed files versus DNG is uncompressed. But I was curious about that. And the files look fabulous. The images look fabulous off this Deluxe 8. So I think Eric, and in terms of being pocketable, not so much. Not unless you got big pocket. A coat pocket, sure, but not like front pocket. like a GR3. GR3 you could probably drop in your front, shirt pocket. This one you're not going to do that. This is going to have to be coat pocket. I don't, and I would discourage you from putting this in your pocket, because this is a dust pump in here, and people have been complaining about dust getting on the sensor and all of that stuff, and there's not really any convenient way to clean it, if at all. So I would, and the D-Lux 8 is no different, right? It's also going to be a dust pump over time. So that was the other thing that got me to kind of pause a little bit and say, am I going to have like a dusty sensor after a few years? The sensor on this is fine. I'm not seeing really any dust on this, but I don't know exactly how much use it's gotten before I got it. And I've only used it for 3 or 4 photo walks, but the images I've gotten from it have been fantastic. And yeah, mostly because of DxO. DxO Photolab does such a good job processing. It's really the great equalizer when it comes to all the cameras I have. I don't care if it's my Sony a7R5, my OM1, my this LX, any raw file I throw at DxO, man, that sucker just cranks out the cleanest, most beautiful image ever, with no fuss, and it's very hard for me to distinguish which camera took what image after I process it with that. So obviously I'm a big fan of DxO. Anyhow, but what makes the D-Lux 8 and this LX100 II very compelling is it's very, very hard to find anything else in that small compact size with a zoom lens starting at f1.7 going to 2.8 with that focal range, 24 to 70 or whatever it is, right? It's a reasonable range. You don't see it. That has an EVF, right? Because there's the LX10, no EVF, 1-inch sensor, f1.4 lens, decent zoom range for about half. It's selling for like the same price it sold new also, which is ridiculous. But that's a pocketable, very fast, high quality camera like the LX10. So I would argue, Eric, if you want a pocketable camera comparable to the GR3, look at the Panasonic LX10. Because GR3 doesn't have an EVF either. So if you're fine without an EVF, I would consider strongly the LX10 and process with DxO, and you're not going to have any issues with the files or image quality at all from an LX10. Or you could go RX100. You could go even if you want the most modern compact camera, the ZV-1, right? The Sony ZV-1, no EVF. A lot of things you have to use the touchscreen for, but fully articulating screen, very compact, excellent Zeiss lens. I think it's a 1.8, like 24 to 70 or 28. Anyway, great camera. You can get those used for 400, brand new for 600, right? Brand new camera. And then the autofocus and the video is going to be better than any of the other cameras we're talking about. It's just the handling. The handling is not, it's not very tactile. The buttons and dials are very limited. So that could be the deal breaker right there. And that's why I haven't picked that. I've looked at it many times, but that's why I haven't picked that up, because it has a great 1-inch sensor, has great autofocus, great video, articulating screen, but then it's there's no tactile buttons on it. And I'd have to use the touchscreen for a lot of things. And it's missing an EVF, which I really want an EVF on my next compact camera. So yeah, see, Roberto's got the same issue, right? It's with no viewfinder. Yeah, it's hard for me to see the screen without putting it way out like this, and then it's too far away by the time it's in focus. And even now, my arms are getting too short. Um, said my big problem is that last night in Old Town. Oh man, should have. I gotta text you my phone number. You should call me when you're in Old Town because I was thinking about going to Old Town last night. Anyway, I don't want to pull out my own one. You'd look like a creep walking around all those people like that. It's not so bad actually. I was walking around with my XH2 in Old Town, and people really didn't bat an eye at me unless I pointed it right at them. You know, if you get in their face with a big ass camera like that, yeah, you might get some dirty looks. But uh, having a small camera certainly a little less draws a little less attention or reaction, right? Because some people that they because I've run into this, people hate people. You'd think you were pointing a cannon at them, not like the brand, but like a frickin' bazooka at them, and they were gonna, and they're like, "Whoa, hey man, come on, why are you taking my picture? What's this for?" Uh, so a smaller camera might mitigate some of that, but ultimately, people know you're taking their picture, whether it's your cell phone or a pocket camera. So might as well use the camera that you want to use. But yeah, I went out with my Nikon DF, and yeah, I felt like I was pointing a bazooka at people with that thing. Whereas when I go out with my Pen F, or even like this LX100, I put these up all side by side. Another tiny camera that's awesome. My old Pen PL8. Look at that. It's not it's not much difference in size, right? And with the kit lens on it, it's actually uh, a little bit smaller. Let me see if I can angle this right. But then if you look at my Pen F, the Pen F is definitely larger. Oh, let me get the LX one. So this is the other thing that keeps me from pulling the trigger on the D-Lux 8. I have the Pen F. Now the Pen F, even here, you can see is significantly larger. And I just have the kit lens on it. So depth-wise, it's about the same when it's all for storing. So this you could put in your coat pocket. You can clean the sensor anytime you want. But the problem is you're starting at f3.5. This you're starting at 1.7. That's a big difference for night photography. If you're going in the street at night or you're shooting indoors, restaurants, even in the daytime, if you're in a restaurant, man, being at 1.7 versus 3.5, you're talking about like on this camera, I might be at like ISO 1600 in a restaurant. This one, I'm going to be at like ISO 5000 or 6400. I mean, some crazy number. Um, and again, DxO kind of levels the playing field a little bit, but I'd rather have this camera indoors or at night shooting than this one with a kit lens. And of course, I can put the 12 to 35 Panasonic f2.8, and that'll extend it out to here. And I thought about that because the 12 to 40 Pro is just too big. But the 12 to 35 2.8 from Panasonic's not bad. Or I could just put the 14 millimeter 2.5 Pancake. And for all intents and purposes, it's not that much bigger than this. And it's certainly more functional and is more versatile for all other types of photography than this ever will be. But this feels that this fits the perfect description of an everyday camera. You have a very fast zoom lens, you have excellent image quality, and you have a ton of features, you know, for when you want to do some more interesting things in the field. Just like the D-Lux 8. Uh, so I'm just gonna do this. What screen is this? That's that screen. Uh, How come I don't have... Okay, that's the screen I want. Let me do it this way. I'm going to move this over here. And I'm going to pull up, and I'll put a link in the description. Okay, can I do this now? All right. So I'm going to put LX100 II. How come it's not showing here? Oh. Pen F. And A6700. And A7C. Okay. So I'm going to add a 12 to 35. I'm going to add the 18 to 50. And then on this one, I'm going to add the 20 to 60. What is that lens I have? It's 28. Yeah, this one. Okay, so here's 3 cameras, or 4 cameras. So here's the LX100, substitute D-Lux 8 here for size and weight, 392 grams with the lens. Now, if I add the lens, now the Pen F is only a little bit more in weight, and it's, you know, certainly a little bigger, right? But this lens is 300 grams. So now we're up to 700 and, 30 grams here. So we're close to double the weight once we add this lens. And this will certainly give you better images, right? But let's move on. Sony A6700, 493 grams. This lens is 290 grams, so 300 plus 500. So you're under 800 grams. So the weight goes up a little bit more. Hold on. This is the wrong camera. I wanted to do the A6600 with the 18. To 50. All right. All right. So 500 plus 300, right? So we're at 800 grams. So we've gone up a little bit more in weight, but overall size is about the same as the Pen F. But we have very, very similar capability here. And then finally, the A7C with a kit lens, f4 to f5.6. This kit lens is awesome. I have this kit lens. And we're going to get similar depth of field and similar image quality across the board here. Probably this will give the best image quality. And this setup here, all 3 of these setups here, pretty much the same price across the board, assuming, this is the Leica D-Lux 8. Because they don't have the D-Lux 8 here in the system yet, but the D-Lux 8 is 1600. You can buy this used with this lens used for around 1500. You can buy this camera used and this lens brand new combined for about 1600. And same thing here. You can buy this lens and this camera for about 1600. And all 3 of these are pretty much the same size and weight. So if we look at the front view, you can see these are all about the same. These are all about the same on the back. And then again, from the top. Now, if we add, let's see, do they have a 28 to 70? The G2. if I wanted to put a 2.8 lens on the full frame, that's where we're at. So that's, this is what a lot of micro four thirds people argue is, if you want to get the same light into the camera. But I'm talking about just getting the same size and weight, image quality, and cost. I would argue that the 28 to 60 kit lens will get you roughly the same quality as any of these combinations, if not better. But nothing comes close to the LX100, right? The LX100 is half the size and weight of all of these other three cameras. So this is where I'm at. So let me just copy this. How do I get back to my stream? So I'll put that link in the comments section if you want to go look at it for yourself. But that combination there, all three, those four cameras, about the same price, give or take $100. Roughly the same image quality across the board, in my opinion, right? But that Leica or LX100 is half the size and weight of all of those, or at least half the weight of those other, well, half the size because the lens is bonkers, right? I don't know. What do you think? Is this, and don't even get me started on the XT30, XT50, right? Because you can get an XT50 for $13.99, and yeah, look, where's, yeah, they don't have the XT50 in here, but let's put the X-T30 in here, and we'll add, let's see, how about their 18? Well, this is their new lens, but that's too expensive. That's a little expensive combination, but that's probably about the same. And the XT30 with this lens weighs 300. So you're under 700 grams here. That's a pretty attractive combination. Well, anyway, this is, where's my, sorry, I lost my streaming tab. But this is what I've been looking at last 48 hours, trying to think about all of these things, and then I'm like, well, look at this Pen PL8. Very small, compact, does everything. Takes great pictures with this kit lens. I'll have to shoot at higher ISOs at night, in low light, like indoors at a restaurant. That's the only time that this is going to suffer compared to, say, the LX100 is when you start to shoot indoors. This is going to give you much better images. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is the D-Lux 8 kind of a compelling camera or not? I think it's very compelling as a pocketable camera that you can take everywhere, that has a fast lens on it, so that you can really use it just about anywhere, indoors in a restaurant or house or somebody's house, right? Or as it starts to get low light outside for parties and things. I think it's very, very compelling. I don't know. Am I still live? I hope so. But leave in the chat section what you think. I'm curious. Or if you're watching this after the fact, leave a comment. Yeah, with that badge, it'll be worth the same in 5 years. I know, right? Because the Deluxe 7 is selling for about the same price it did brand new. Oh, so when I look at it, all of these things, I'm like, yeah, this is a very compelling package. All that said, I have all of these other cameras that really aren't that much bigger ultimately and are certainly more capable. And I think equally as stylish, right? If not more so. So buying a camera like that in my case is stupid. And that's why I left that comment. I'm an idiot if I buy this camera because I don't need it. I got all these other great cameras that will take better pictures, but there's none of them are small as and compact as this. This is just tiny. Unless I go for the LX100, or I'm sorry, the LX10. LX10 is very compelling, but no EVF. Oh, oh, well, yeah. This David Tellett. This is actually David Tellett's LX100 II. I strongly recommend you keep this or sell it to me. If you sell it to me, I won't buy the Deluxe 8. But yeah, I think you should keep it. Really, I didn't find anything more compelling in terms of an everyday camera than this to take with you everywhere. Uh, when I look at everything out there, I just don't see anything that competes with that. But yeah, send me an email if you want to sell it to me. Let me know how much you want for it, and I might just buy it off you, and I'll save like whatever amount of money off a new Deluxe 8 because man, I'm so tempted to buy that thing. Oh, okay. Um, yeah, Marco says he likes Chris' review and thought it was fair. If it'll bring you joy, brother, go for it. Trade in some cameras you never use. Problem is these things are not worth much, right? What's this broken PL, it's not really broken, just the screen is I bent the screen because I dropped this camera and they'd give me like $10 for this probably. But I don't know. I wouldn't trade anything in. I like my DF. I like my XH2, which I really want to go out and shoot with. I haven't taken it out at all. The A7R5 is really the only camera I'm not crazy about. Um, but I don't think I would get enough for it on trade, and it's brand new to me still. Takes great pictures, and the autofocus, yeah, is as good as everyone says, no question. Uh, 60 megapixels. I mean, it it was very compelling, and I got such a good deal. Like I said, I paid about 3 grand, a little under 3 grand for it, brand new with warranty and everything, right? So I could probably sell it for that retail to somebody. If somebody wants to offer me 3,000 for that camera right now, I will sell it like this. But uh, but I'd have to replace with maybe the A7C or A7C2. Because the problem I'm having with the A7R is the 60 megapixels is just so many pixels. It's just way more than I need. And yeah, it gives me a little bit of cropping ability without any loss in quality, but I frame my images the right way to begin with, right? I frame them the way I want the shot to be in the end. So I try to minimize any cropping that I do. It's just good practice to take the picture the way it's supposed to be in camera rather than cropping. I get it. Sometimes you don't have a choice, right? You only have your wide angle lens with you and you want to take this shot, but you don't need all this extra stuff in the scene. Then yeah, go ahead and crop it. And this camera will be good for that. But uh, I just don't find a lot of joy in that camera. It's not fun to use. It's takes great pictures, but it's just not It's like 0.1% of how much joy I get out of using my Pen F, to be honest. Yes, I do have. Well, what Nikkor lenses do I have for my DF? It's very limited now. When I sold my Nikon D750, I sold the bulk of my lenses that I had. But I have the 35 millimeter f2, the 60 millimeter f2 8-point macro. Those are the two. Those are the two autofocus lenses that I have that still work. That is Zeiss 35 f2. That lens was gold, but it was too big and heavy. I thought I would never sell that lens, but after about 3 or 4 years of never taking it off the shelf, I decided to sell it. I got a decent price for it, but that lens was fabulous. I have the 105 2.5. I have the 135 3.5, and these are the AI lenses, right? The vintage, and that's about it, really. So 135, 105, 60 macro, 35 f2, and a 51.4. There might be some other miscellaneous lenses laying around, but those are the ones that I would use with that camera. Did I visit the alienist for his shopping spree? I have no idea what you're talking about. What is an alienist? Uh, had to pull over type. Work car cam. Okay. My take is you can't bear a new camera. I can understand used lenses, but never a camera. That's the brains, and you want them fresh. You can't bear a new camera. But no, so you're saying never buy a used camera? I mean, the way prices are now, it's almost like no point to buy used anymore. Might as well buy brand new. The way used prices are going for a lot of the cameras that I'm looking at, it's crazy. Oh, can't beat. Okay, got it. Now I understand. You meant can't beat. Got it. Yeah. I don't know, Eric. Maybe the Deluxe 8 is the way to go. I mean, seriously, I think it's pretty reasonable price. You know, it's not as capable as those other cameras that I laid out that would be about the same price. And those are all used prices, not brand new, right? But if you want to compare brand new prices across the board, yeah, then the Deluxe 8 is even more attractive because you can buy it's much less expensive than any of those other options I showed you. If you could still buy them brand new. Certainly the A6600 you can buy brand new. It's like a 800 to 1,000 brand new. Then the lens that might be the exception. But like the A7C R or A7C Mark II is like 2 grand. Yeah, and then you throw the lens on top of that, used or brand new, it's not cheap. Thinking of the Z6 Mark II, finding them used for, I would skip it. I would get, I would skip it. I would get the Z7 Mark II for about 300 more. Well, I get 26 megapixels when you can get 47. I know the low light performance is not quite the same, but yeah, I would just get the highest resolution camera you can, you know. And I know people say pixels don't matter. And I just told you how I hate shooting at 60 megapixels, but 47 is not that bad. 60s feels a bit much, but when I was shooting with my Panasonic S1R, that was like 46 or 47, whatever it was. It was in the 40s. My Fuji is 40 megapixels. That's not so bad. My computer is not like, you know, screaming bloody murder when I'm editing the files. But when I throw a Sony file in there, my God, the computer just really struggles. Oh, hey Thomas, good to see you. uh, On topic though, the Samyang 135 or 200, the ones used for astrophotos, that is a good candidate for the proper weather sealing. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I didn't even think about that because astro stuff, a lot of times you're shooting all night long, and a weather sealed lens would be very, very beneficial. I don't know if those lenses are weather sealed or not. I'm not familiar with them, but um, that's another big plus for weather sealing, right? Is to have for astrophotography, definitely. But yeah, I don't know, Darko. If you're already in the Z mount system, uh, I would just go Z7 Mark II. I don't, because it's not that much more. It's like 300 bucks more here. I can buy a Z7 II for like 1900 and a Z6 II for like 1500, kind of the same in US dollars, I believe. Let me just double check. I'm not really looking at those cameras myself. Oh wow, 1200 for a Z6 II and a Z7 II. So there's about a $400 or $500 gap. Still, I would go for uh I would go for see the Z7 II, excellent for 1725, and then a Z6 II, excellent for 1200. So about a $500 gap. I would just go for the Z7 II myself. How's the low light capability of the 45? It's good. It was good. Uh, I think I have it on my Flickr page, a comparison. Let me take a look. Yeah, let me give you this link. So, sorry, let me give you guys a link. Um, so here's a low light shot. This is at base ISO, but basically what I did is I pushed the highlights and shadows, right? 100%. Here's the OM1. Here's the XH2. Where's the S1R? Oh shit. I'm speaking out my butt here. Hold on. S1R here. This is the one I wanted to show you. All right, this is the link. So here's the cameras at ISO 51000. So there's the OM1, there's the XH2, and there's the S1R. It's not that much difference. And then once you denoise them, they're all about the same. But if you click this link over here and download the original, you can pixel peep them and see the difference. Okay. But yeah, check that out. It looks like I took out the chroma noise, so the only thing left is the luminance noise. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't worry about it. It was fine, and the same thing's going to be true for the Z6 II, Z7 II. The main difference is when we're talking about dynamic range, the 24 megapixel Z6 II, you're going to be able to pull shadows like you've never seen before. Highlights are about the same, but I think shadow wise, because when I had my D750, oh my God, I could underexpose by like 5 stops, pull it back with very little noise. I mean, I might be exaggerating a little, but you get the idea. There's no comparison between a 24 megapixel full frame camera and a camera with a higher pixel density like the 47 megapixels or our micro four thirds. You have to look at the pixel pitch of the sensor, and that's going to dictate really pretty much the noise you're going to get, regardless of sensor size. So, 60 megapixels on a full frame camera still has bigger pixels than our 20 megapixel micro four thirds. So you're still going to get better dynamic range and low noise performance in a full frame 60 megapixel sensor than you will a 20 megapixel micro four thirds. It's really just about pixel pitch. It's not so much about the sensor size. But how often are you shooting at super high ISO? If you are, you may want to think about getting the 24 megapixel instead of the 47. But if you're shooting normal stuff, you're fine with I'd rather have more megapixels personally. Let's see. Saves customer setting and gives you pro cap and regular burst. What do you mean by pixel pitch? Oh, okay. So, let me find a website. And I will give you the link. So let's explore this just for a few minutes, right? I'll make this larger so it's easier to see. But basically what they're talking about is the size of each pixel. So if we look for, let's sort this by camera. And we'll go down to LMNO. Okay, so here's any 20 megapixels. So here's one, right? Micro four thirds, we have a 3.3 micrometer, nanometer, whatever this is, pixel pitch, right? And we have to talk about modern sensors, not like from 10 years ago. They did make some improvements, not so much to the sensor, but to the electronics and the circuit board in the camera, so it generates less internal noise. So there's more than just sensor pixel pitch that has to deal with noise. But we have 3.3, then we go down to, say, a Sony A7R5 or 4, doesn't matter. But see, this is 3.8, so it has a bigger pixel, right? So you're going to get ultimately less noise, more dynamic range with a bigger pixel. If you look at a 24 megapixel full frame sensor, look at the size of that. 5.9. It's nearly double the size of our micro four thirds. All right, so let's find a camera. Let me go up here. I'm going to sort this way and then come down. So we're at 3.3. This is APS-C. These are all APS-Cs. Let's see, D-Lux 7, 3.4. I believe that's wrong. This was measured wrong, but anyway. What would be a good example? Damn it. Where's our full frame cameras? Let me go back. Look at the A7S III, 8.4, huge. And everyone talks about how this is a low light monster. That's why. Look at the size of the pixels. Here's the Nikon DF. All right, so if we go to DP Review, and let's see, sample images, studio scene. So let's put in the Z6 II, Nikon D7 II. So you can see clearly there's more pixels here, right? Let's switch this to RAW. Let's do 25,000. So the Z7 II has more noise, right? Because it has smaller pixels, even though it's the same size sensor. Um, so that's why you want to look for sensors if you want low light performance. And this doesn't get any better as you go up, right? Like even here, it's even more obvious. But if I find two cameras with different sensors that have about the same pixel pitch, uh, 3.9. What is the Sony? This has a pixel pitch of 3.9, which I think is the same as the A7R5, 3.8. So let's look at this APS-C 6100. Let's do that. So if we do Sony, what's their most modern one here? Sony A6700 with the A7R5. So these two cameras have roughly the same pixel pitch. Ironic, wow, look at that. It's actually, this looks a lot noisier to me. What if we go back to 25,000? And what was the pixel pitch here? 3.9. This has a bigger pixel pitch than the A7R5, but they're pretty close. This was 3.9, this was 3.8, so this does have bigger pixels. I would have expected that to be a lot closer. How about their previous model? Oops, it's locked up, damn it. Sorry, I'm having technical issues. But generally what I'm trying to demonstrate here is when you have cameras of about the same pixel pitch across the board, they're going to have similar noise, dynamic range, performance. I mean, assuming it's a modern camera. Okay. Hello, Rob and all. Anybody else ever have days where they feel like they just shouldn't bother after getting back from a day out shooting, or am I alone? Hope not. What do you mean by just shouldn't bother? Like, so you got back from photo shoot, you mean don't bother editing or processing or loading the photos in your computer? Very rarely. I always load them into the computer, but sometimes I don't edit them right away, if that's what you mean. I've had days like that, but very rarely. Usually I like to get back and start editing. Like yesterday, I got back from a photo shoot, and I was so tired because I had to get up at 4 in the morning, and I got home about 9:30, and I loaded the images in, and I just could not keep my eyes open, so I went to sleep, and I didn't get to post until later. But okay. Oh, I love the Trek University. You know, take everything I say with a grain of salt, okay? Because I'm I'm not an engineer. I never designed lenses or cameras, right? But I research as much as I can and try to make rational decisions, right? Ultimately, I buy things with no rational, very irrational purchases. Like this D-Lux 8 is probably going to be an irrational purchase. Um, but yeah, I but I've come to find, you find things out as you go along, right? Like I really studied lens design quite a bit. So when I do my lens reviews, I try to share a little bit of that information about the lens design. So I show the optical structure of the lens, I show the MTF chart, I talk about the spherical lenses versus not having a spherical lenses. Um, one of the arguments I hear about people saying like the 150 to 600 is too big. They should have made it for micro four thirds. It would have been smaller. It cannot be smaller because of the way aperture, the way the aperture works, right? To have a certain aperture like f6.3 at 600 millimeters, you cannot have a lens smaller than this. Okay, it's just it's physically impossible. Uh, using the same system of measurement that we use now. Uh, Now, the overall light flux that comes through the lens is certainly more than a micro four thirds lens, so that ultimately the rear element can be smaller, right? Everything behind the aperture blades can be smaller for micro four thirds because ultimately the total amount of light that you need to get through the lens is less because the sensor is smaller. But the actual size of the lens in front of the aperture, um, if you want an f6.3 at 600 millimeters, you have to have like a 95 millimeter front lens element, no smaller than that. Because ultimately the aperture has to be 95 millimeters. It might be 92, but anyway, close enough. So what does that mean? And it's a zoom lens, so this zoom has to go in and out. So they have to make the entire length of the barrel 95 millimeters, right? So even if they tried to design it for micro four thirds from scratch, there's no getting around zooming lens barrel of that length, f6.3 600 millimeters. There's just no getting around that. Uh, the only place they could save a little bit of weight or size is behind the aperture blades. Uh, and then, but because it's a zoom lens, meaning, and it's one of those lenses that go in and out, right? It expands in and out. It's not like internal zoom. It's all external. It wouldn't matter if they could make the lens elements inside the lens smaller because ultimately, because of the zoom barrel, uh, zooming in and out, it has to stay at that 95 millimeter size or whatever the diameter is. So don't let anybody tell you that they could have made this lens smaller if it was for micro four thirds. They could not. So it makes perfect sense to me. They just said, let's get the Sigma to re-engineer it for to work with our cameras. Now, small lenses like the 25 millimeter f1.8, the 45 millimeter f1.8. Think about it, right? You can find full frame lenses of similar focal lengths that are about that size, but they look bigger. They are bigger because ultimately the total amount of light that has to get through there has to be more. And that's why they can't make the rear element any smaller to cover that full frame sensor. Generally speaking, the elements in the rear, it doesn't have to be the absolute last element in the back. Because they can put like a convex lens or something on the back that spreads the light again, but then you kind of lose image quality, right? In the corners and things when you start bending light that much. I mean, it's very complicated. Uh, it's way beyond. This is why I'm not a lens engineer. It's way beyond what I could ever learn about lens design and optics. But I did try to get a fundamental understanding of why are micro four thirds lenses smaller than, say, full frame lenses of the same focal length and aperture. And if you look at the front elements a lot of times are about the same size as micro four thirds or full frame. If it's the same focal length, same aperture, but it's because of the rear element and the total light flux that has to go through the lens to fill the sensor is different. But it's not like, so when people say, yeah, you get 4 times more light on a full frame sensor, that is true, but it's spread out more. So your actual amount of light per pixel or per square centimeter is the same, whether it's micro four thirds or full frame. Your exposure is the same. It's just you need more light to cover the sensor more. That's all. Anyway, I I need to get off my soapbox about lenses can be smaller when we're talking about the shorter focal lengths, but the longer focal lengths it gets really difficult. Um, oh, I see John is here. And Paul says, I wanted to pass on. I now use, oh, I wanted to pass on. I now use ProCrap SH2 for back button focus. And if you just fully press the shutter button, it works like regular SH2. You have press it, it buffers. Okay, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So you're focusing with the back button and you're doing the Pro Capture with the shutter button. I've never separated the two, but that makes sense. Why are M43 Pro lenses bigger than the primes? Well, let's talk about, okay, there's an inverse relationship between the quality of the image coming from a lens to the size of the lens. So, you know, the Pro lenses, how can I put this? If you look at the cutout of a Pro lens, you see like 17 elements in a Pro lens. And they put all of these elements in there so that the final light ray that hits the sensor is as fine and as sharp as it can be, with as little splitting of the various spectrums of light. They have it all focused into one pixel the best they can. The fewer lenses that you use, the less control you have over that stream of light hitting the sensor. So ultimately, the light that hits the sensor might be spread out a little bit, and that's when you start to see like chromatic aberrations like purple and blue fringing, right? And other types of weird aberrations like coma and stuff, is because they don't have enough elements in there to correct that ray of light before, so that it hits the sensor at a very, very fine point. Now, spherical lenses have mitigated the need for so many lenses, right? So they can make the lenses smaller now than they used to because of the fact of spherical lenses. But spherical lenses have been around for 50 years. It's only more recently, like in the last 10 or 20 years, that spherical lenses have been more commonplace. But they're more expensive to make, and they have a downside, with the exception of Leica. Okay, the downside being is that's where you start to see these onion ring effects in the speculars, in the bokeh, the autofocus areas where that have speculars. You'll start to see onion ring effect because spherical lenses are very difficult to polish. Unlike a regular spherical lens, they have that down. They can polish a spherical lens no problem, whether it's a ED lens, high refractive lens, etc. You know, all of these lenses are spherical, very easy to polish, but an aspherical lens, not so easy to polish. So that's why you see this onion ring effect, right? And Leica is one of the few companies, I'm sure the G Master lenses, I don't know about the processing of those, but the Leica lenses, they have, you know, for their high end, there's the Summicron, you know, lenses. They go through a very, very advanced polishing procedure for their spherical lenses, so you don't get that onion ringing effect. Okay. But yeah, that's why the Pro lenses are bigger, because they want to minimize the number of chromatic aberrations. They want the lenses to be as sharp as possible, meaning getting all of the light into a single pixel. And the lenses have, and the finer that they can do that, the higher resolution sensor you can use these lenses on. So if you do go to a 25 megapixel micro four thirds sensor, the pro lenses are going to resolve better and give you sharper images than non-pro lenses because they have all of this corrective glass inside. And lens technology has not changed in a long, long time relative to uh, polishing and design and all of that. And people are you are seeing now smaller lenses for full frame, but that's not coming without some compromise somewhere. And the only way to make up for that really is you use a 24 megapixel full frame sensor. You're not going to see as many defects in the lens as if you use the 47 or 60 megapixel sensor. So it makes a difference what kind of camera you are using that lens on. So that 28 to 60 kit lens that I have is going to perform better on the 24 megapixel full frame sensor than it will the 60 megapixel sensor. It's going to have less chromatic aberrations because the pixels are capturing everything all at once anyway because they're so big. So larger pixel sensors generally are more forgiving of lenses, and you can use lower quality lenses on very large megapixel sensor cameras or very, very large pixel cameras that have big pixel pitches. Oh, so again, I don't want to get too deep into it because I'm going to say something totally wrong or I've been misinformed. So always, always double check anything that I'm saying. If I say something and you're like, that doesn't make sense, double check, do your own due diligence, etc. I'm just telling you what I've seen and learned and done the best I can to research lens design. And ultimately, the way things are now, you cannot make a smaller lens without compromising something, right? Like take the Leica 25 millimeter f1.4. I think it's like only 7 or 8 elements. There's very few elements in that lens, but it's a fast f1.4 and tack sharp when you stop it down to f5.6, even maybe f4, but wide open, it's a little bit soft. So that's why you hear everyone that reviews that lens, they say it has this very vintage feel when you shoot it wide open, but then it's, tack sharp and excellent, when you stop it down. That's because they're not using very many elements to correct the lens to be sharp wide open, right? Well, anyway, that's why they're bigger. The long story short, there is an inverse relationship between lens size and lens performance. And then to your point, APS-C lenses are much closer in size to MFT, at least on the short end. Yeah, I know. It's just simple physics the way they describe lenses. Now, if they used total light flux or throughput of a lens instead of, aperture, we would have very, very different numbers for lenses, even though they're about the same size. But because we're stuck with the aperture and determining, exposure, uh, lenses are going to be very similar. They're going to have very similar specs. And Darko says, I have old three or element lens. I think you mean 3-element lenses. That was cool from a vintage look of images. Yeah, when you have front, middle convex kind of like lens, this is your typical lens, right? 3-element lens, and then the rear element. And really, that's all you need to do to focus a lens. You really only need 2 lenses to focus, but three elements to focus the lens into a spot, right? Onto a focal plane of a certain size. And in this sense, but the reason these lenses are so vintage or give you that vintage look is because they're not correcting for a lot of the imperfections that would show on a digital sensor. These old lenses were made for film and a lot of times for black and white film, and these imperfections just don't show on black and white film. But on our modern digital cameras, you get a very, very vintage look because of all of these imperfections. They're a little bit soft because they're not able to um, focus the light down to a pixel size or pixel pitch size. They're going to have all kinds of aberrations because I talked about coma a little bit. There's this other thing. Diffraction is kind of a defect, but in a triplet lens is a big deal, right? They're not able to correct for the way that the light beams through or gets reflect. What's the word I'm looking for? Diffraction or refraction and diffraction. You only have three elements, so you're not able to correct this refraction, diffraction of the light going through the lens before it hits the sensor. A very common characteristic of very low element count lenses is the soap bubble effect, where you look in the speculars in the bokeh and you got this soap bubble where the outer edges of the specular are very bright. That's a very common characteristic of like 3-element lenses or 4 or 5. You can even see it in some 7 and 8-element lenses where they didn't try to correct for that, but they were trying to correct for other things. So yeah, so you could have really, really cool vintage look, especially in the autofocus areas with these 3-element lenses. Whoops. Cool, makes a lot of sense. Have you used a reflex mirror lens before? I got one last week. No, I've never used one. But those have absolutely that soap bubble effect, right? Because you just have a lens in a mirror and the mirror bounces it back through a hole. So as the lens bending around that hole in the center, um, you get that soap bubble effect. But what is a reflex mirror doing really? It's just extending the length of the lens, but doing it through mirrors instead. But the downside of the mirror is it takes away light. That's why those reflex lenses are typically like f8, right? Even though they have a huge front element, they're typically like an f8. So you can't use the same really math to calculate the size of a reflex lens. You have to calculate the size of the mirror in addition to the diameter to come up with the aperture. So, you have this giant front element on a reflex lens, but it's f8. Like if you look at an f8 lens on a normal lens, they're like this big, right? The front element is tiny. It's like a cell phone lens. But you look at an f8 reflex mirror, it's like this, right? It's huge. But yeah, I've never used one. I've always thought about getting one. Um, It'd be kind of cool to walk around with a 500 mm lens that's only this big, right? To me, asking a $1,400 Canadian to reverse engineer 180 to 600 to work on AMs, I feel like it's asking too much. If it was an extra 600, I would not mind, but I feel like it's just being greedy. Yeah, who knows? Like I said, I don't know if it's OM Systems or Sigma that said is jacking up the price, right? Because OM Systems might be only making $100 on the lens and Sigma's making 1,000. Who knows where that balance is? Or they both wanted a good chunk, right? They're equally adding a lot to the money or a lot to the lens. But again, they're pricing it, I think, based on what else is available within the Micro Four Thirds system. And yeah, it's unfortunate. It'd been nice. It'd have been nice if Sigma just made it themselves. Uh, and just said, okay, the IBIS is not going to be great because we couldn't re-engineer it perfectly, but you got 600 millimeters. You're shooting at 1/2000th, 1/4000th of a second anyway. Who needs IBIS, right? Or who needs image stabilization at those focal lengths when you're doing birds in flight, fast action? If you're doing bird on a stick, yeah, then maybe the image stabilization would be more important. Maybe that was the challenge. I don't know why it's so much more expensive. But what else is in the Micro Four Thirds lineup that will give you that kind of reach at that price? Nothing. My 300 millimeter f4 with the 2x teleconverter is going to cost you like $700 or $800 more than the 150 to 600 and give you basically a slower lens because you'd be at f8, 600 millimeters. Whereas this Sigma's lens is f6.3 at 600 millimeters. So there's just, I think it has a lot to do with just pricing it based on what else you could get for Micro Four Thirds. So from that aspect, it's not that bad, the price. It's the problem is, we know we have that same lens for other mounts for like half the price, right? And it makes it a little hard to swallow when OM System makes the same, uses the same lens and charges that much more. But it is what it is. I think it's priced about right for what it is, but I understand it's hard to swallow when Sigma makes that same lens for someone else for, I've seen it for like $1,200, right? For less than half the price on sale. Very interesting lens design. I try. In a live stream, it's not organized. I'm not being very succinct. And it's very hard to articulate without diagrams and things. But I don't want to make a video about lens design because I'm not a lens engineer. So it's better for me to just jibber jabber in a live stream about it and try to give you some idea or starting point to start looking at lens design. But let's get rid of these myths that you can make a Micro Four Thirds lens smaller when we're talking about these telephoto zooms. You have to look at the aperture and the focal length. I mean, look at any 300 millimeter f4 for any camera system. They're all about the same size. Okay, the 300 millimeter f4 Nikon, the 300 millimeter f4 Olympus. Those two lenses are virtually identical size and weight. The only difference is the rear mount is bigger on the Nikon because it has to be for full frame, so you need more light throughput. Now, the exception is there's a 300 millimeter f4 from, I think, Pentax. That is significantly smaller and lighter. The front element's the same size, but the overall lens is smaller. But they use about half as many elements in that lens, and it gets terrible reviews. Okay, so they did not make many corrections. It's a terrible lens. Don't buy the 300 millimeter f4 Pentax. Okay, but there's also the Nikon PF lens, right? That uses a Fernel lens technology, and I use that word loosely, to make the lens smaller and lighter. But the front element is the same size, but then you'll notice that it like shrinks down towards the back. But the Fresnel lens, the problem with Fresnel lenses, that technology is the background blur, the speculars. If you have any speculars in your background, they're going to be a freaking train wreck with the Nikon PF. So there's always compromises, like I said. Yeah, you can make a lens smaller and lighter, in a full frame camera, but you're going to compromise something, right? There's no way around it with the current lens technology. Now, there are lens technologies way out in the horizon, okay, that could potentially make every lens a pancake lens regardless of focal length. But, I doubt we'll see that anytime soon. I've only heard about it and I can't find it again. But it was really interesting when I was reading about it. I thought I bookmarked the site, but I can't find it now. But it had something to do with putting micro lenses on the lens itself, right? I forget what the technology is called, but you got basically micro lenses on top of a lens that can make the lens basically any focal length in one lens and correct for all the aberrations. I mean, it's really amazing. But if they were close to making anything like that, we would start to see it trickle in at least a little bit in a current lens design, but we're not seeing even a little bit, right? Yeah, old lenses with minimal coatings gives a different look, definitely. I mean, basically, the purpose of a coating is to reduce reflections, because this is one of the beautiful things about three-element lenses. There is very little reflections inside, because there's only three elements there for light to reflect off of. Well, four if you count the sensor, because light reflects off the sensor too, that causes flaring. But ideally, the sensor is coated. I don't know. But lenses, they started adding coating to lenses to reduce the reflection within the lens. So now any modern lens has coatings on it to reduce ghosting and flaring internally. Yeah, the donut bokeh on the mirror lens. Well, in my dreams, I only want a 100 megapixel medium format point and shoot that does wildlife to macro and everything in between. Well, eventually they're just going to come out. If this other lens technology comes to fruition, they're going to be able to make contact lenses, with nanotechnology in it. And you're just going to be able to blink and take a picture of whatever you want at whatever focal length you want. It's coming one day, and you'll have heads-up display right in your contact lens. Certainly, the first thing that certainly we're seeing a little bit of that now with the virtual reality glasses, but they're all big and bulky. They look ridiculous. But one day, right? I feel by overpricing the 150 to 600 ohm super zoom, turning away customers away from ohm systems and micro four thirds by overpricing their lenses. Yeah, that's a tough call. I mean, saying something's overpriced, I think, is a little subjective. Um, but a lot of people feel that way. They're overpricing their lenses. I don't disagree with that statement. I'm in your camp. I think by overpricing the lenses, uh, they're certainly turning people away to look at other systems, because you can get Canon R5, or you can get a Canon R6 for about $2,000, right? R6 Mark II for about $2,000. Well, not let's use Nikon, because Canon's lenses. But yeah, I get it. Like I did that example with the D-Lux 8. Same thing applies to telephoto lenses. You can get the same 150 to 600 lens, assuming the same optical performance, right? Mount that to, say, the Nikon Z8, or not Z8. Let's go. Nikon doesn't have great autofocus cameras though, outside of their higher end stuff. What? Oh, the Z6 II. Okay, Z6 III. I'm sorry. Let's take the Z6 III. That's a very good camera for autofocus. Z6 III is 2,500. You throw on a $1,200 Sigma lens, and you have a really, really compelling option here over OM systems, because the OM1 is what, $2,100 on sale right now, but let's say it's at the full. Now, granted, it's half the focal length, or field of view, I should say. If you were to try to crop in on a Z6 III, it's going to be very pixelated next to an OM1. So ultimately, I think the OM1 is still a much more compelling option and worth double the price. But it's hard to swallow, right? When you see basically the same lens. So that's why I say when you and I use the term that they are overpricing their lens, granted, that's a very subjective statement, right? I don't want to, it's not objective. Uh, Objectively, it's more expensive, but subjectively, it's overpriced. That's the way I look at it. So I try not to judge and be subjective. I try to look at things objectively. Objectively, I think it's priced about right for the Micro Four Thirds system, or what's available to you in Micro Four Thirds. Subjectively, I'm with you, man. It feels overpriced, and you could be looking at other systems. How do PF phase fresh? Oh, the Fernel lenses. Well, the Fernel lens, okay. Fernel lens basically takes a very thick piece of glass. Like you have, let's say, think of take a circle, cut it in half, right? This is what I mean about doing videos or talking about lens design. It's hard to do without a diagram. I guess I could do it on a piece of paper. Not that you could see it. Here's my Sharpie. So take a half a circle, right? So this is a typical lens element inside of a lens, right? Regular concave lens. I'm sorry, convex. So what a Fernel lens does, a Fernel technology makes the lenses much lighter and shorter, right? And smaller. Not diameter-wise, but in terms of length, because what it does is they cut the lens into pieces, right? Like this. Something like this. So what they do is they cut off the front of the lens like this, and you end up with a lens like this. So if I just cut off the front of this lens like this, right, and put them all together onto a flat piece of glass, I've now made this lens, or this particular lens element, right, like 10% of the weight. And I'm exaggerating, but that's basically what a Fresnel lens is. If you do a YouTube search on Fresnel lenses, they'll do the same thing. But you're able to achieve basically the same optical performance by breaking the lens down like this. But this is the problem with Fresnel lenses in like the Nikon PF, is if you look at the speculars of a Nikon PF lens, the background, it's all jaggedy and has tons of circular rings in it. This is why, is because the lens is not smooth. It's all jagged like this, like a Fresnel lens, versus a normal convex lens is very smooth and polished and rounded. But Fresnel lenses, so that's what they're doing in the Nikon PF lens. They're using this, basically this Fresnel technology, to make the lens much lighter and smaller in terms of depth, not diameter, because they're able to achieve the same optical properties in something only this thick instead of this thick. Hopefully that makes sense. Maybe nanotechnology. Yeah, one day, nanotechnology, man. That's going to take over the world, cure cancer, but ultimately be our demise, I think. So we'll see. We'll see a very brief period of prosperity with nanotechnology until it figures out it would be better off without us. We are in the matrix, so anything is possible. I believe it. OM System has recently increased their prices, and now their lenses are not much cheaper than the Z lenses. Yeah. Yeah, they're good. Their good lenses are definitely very premium in terms of pricing. There's no question the Nikon S lenses are very good. They're so good. I would argue, and this is why I like the L mount, the Panasonic L mount glass. It's relatively inexpensive, like a half the cost of the Nikon glass, and I think optically just as good in my opinion. So if you ask me, and I'm being subjective, Nikon is overpriced. Okay, and then Micro Four Thirds is priced the same as Nikon. So by association, Micro Four Thirds is overpriced. The L mount glass is from Panasonic, is the best value, most optically superior glass I've ever seen in my life, and that's why I want to get back into that system, because they're so reasonably priced. All their 1.8s and their f4s. If you get into their 1.4s, yeah, it gets kind of pricey. But if you look at their 1.8s, and they're f4s, you're getting such excellent quality glass at such a reasonable price, you know. And then you can buy their cameras, the S5 II, right? My God, that camera is a bargain. I don't like the S5 II because I had the S5, didn't care for it, but image quality, video quality, no question, it was awesome. Awesome. I had more of a problem with the ergonomics of the camera, okay? But uh the S1R, which I talk about, I feel like in every single stream, the S1R, yeah, it's a monster camera, but ergonomically that thing was amazing. I could put that in my hand. It was heavy, so I'd have to use two hands because it's like a kilo, right? It was very, very comfortable. Um, because I can get an S1R for less than the price of a D-Lux 8. That's the other reason I didn't pull the trigger. But then I have to buy the lenses all over again because I sold all my L-mount glass. And Eric, oh my God, thank you so much, Eric. I don't know how to show this on the stream, but Eric just dropped a $50 super chat. I'm so grateful for that. Thank you so much. And Darko, let's see. Not sure what you mean. Nice photo edit. Maybe you can show how to create a preset, especially like the one using the beginning. Oh, okay. I'll do that next time. I'm going to do another photo editing stream, I think Tuesday. Maybe Wednesday evening. I have to check my calendar. I actually have a photo job this week, so it's going to be a little random what day it is, though, is the problem. Good morning, Rob Trek. I have the D-Lux 5 and Panny ZS100 for fun. Awesome. Yeah, the ZS100 is very interesting. It's a little compact zoom. My chat jumped up again. Sorry. I'm just going through the chat. Okay, Rob, whatever happened to the weather-sealed Olympus lens you left out in the snow a couple of years ago? Yeah, I still use it. It's actually mounted on my camera right now. I put a Pro Mist filter on front. Not that it needs it now, but it works great. It's still sharp enough. I'm sure it's not as sharp as it was when I first got it. But I can't really tell in my pictures. The pictures still look awesome. It works great. That's funny you remember that. I must have done that years ago, like 4 or 5 years ago. But yeah, I'm still using this. It's great. The 12 to 40 Pro. What happened was, for those of you that don't know, the lens, I left the lens outside in the snow. I left the lens outside on my picnic table with no cap on the top, like this. And it rained overnight, and it was the winter time, and all the water got inside, and then the water froze inside the lens. So the next day when I was looking for it, it was under like 2 or 3 inches of snow and full of ice. I tried to zoom a little bit and it wouldn't, this thing would not budge. It was frozen solid. So I put it, you know, in my house and I let it dry out for like a month. I didn't touch the lens for a month. And then once I was sure it was dry, I put it on the camera. It worked fine. Now there's a ton of spots inside where the water dried. So that's what I mean. It's probably not as sharp as it was, but yeah. Testament to the quality of these lenses. It's amazing. And it goes to the argument about saying that these lenses are subjectively overpriced. I mean, when you think about how many lenses would be able to survive that, I don't know. if something is built that well. I mean, look at Leica lenses. If you want to talk about something being overpriced, but then when you know, objectively they're very expensive. Subjectively, are they overpriced? I don't know. It's a tough call. When I got tired of the megapixel chase, I used bridge cameras with half-inch sensors for events and pretty much got away with it. Not much room. Cool. I should take my bridge cameras out. I got one or two of those. I was looking at the FC1000 actually, thinking about getting one. Sony A7 IV or Canon R5, but then I got to get all new lenses. I know, forget it. It's not worth it. But I would get the R5. But if you get the Sony, you can get a lot of lenses. Especially that you have a YouTube channel, they might start asking you, you know, do you want to review our lens? um, it's weird how my chat jumps up. Here it is. Eric, thank you so much. You're so generous. I think of a lighthouse lens. Yeah, lighthouses use Fernel technology, which was developed like in the late 1800s by a guy named Fernel, hence the name. And the whole business model is, OM Systems' whole business model is built around getting as much money out of the customers. Why does focus stacking only work with pro lenses and their macro lenses? That's an interesting question. I don't know why. I don't know why it's limited. Well, the focus bracketing works with all the lenses, but the in-camera stacking does not, right? Oh, that's what you said though. Focus stacking. Yeah, the stacking is where bracketing works. So let's not confuse bracketing with stacking, but in-camera stacking is a software thing, right? Why would it be any different? From now on, lenses have been using in light. Yeah, that's true. They've been around a long time. So maybe it's longer than the 1800s? I thought it was in the late 1800s. Whoops, that was from a long time ago. See, my chat jumps way up. Is it Fresnel or Fernel? It's Fernel. The S is silent. Nikon P1000. Oh, um, that's an old compact camera. I don't know much about it. Let me look at it real quick. Oh, that's the bridge camera. Sorry. Yeah, that's a pretty cool camera. I mean, you know, you're gonna have the low light limitations because the sensor's only, you know, it's a less than a quarter-inch sensor, but or less than a half-inch sensor. But yeah, a lot of people use it and love it. It takes great pictures. It's a little limited. Like I don't think you can go above f8. Like there was some really weird quirks with it. Uh, so there's some compromises to get that focal length because it's a huge range. You know, it's like 1,000 millimeters or something, right? Hence the name. But so there's some compromises, like you can't go beyond f8, and you can't some other things. You know, but yeah, if it's your only camera, you'll be fine. Fresnel lenses used, yes, hundreds of years. When Fresnel, 18, yeah, it was early 1800s. So yeah, it's hundreds of years. Early 1800s is when it started. I didn't see the exact date, but it's on Wikipedia. Shocking. Imagine a company intending to make a profit to stay in business. I know. Z5 does not stack in camera, but shoots a series of images for a stack by autofocusing in increments by the users. Yeah, that's focus bracketing. And Ed says, what would happen if you stack holograms of lenses into a lens tube? I recall the optical effects of a lens would then be depicted by a flat surface and rather than in weight. Just a mind flick, by the way, but it could be usable theory. Interesting. What would happen if you stack holograms of lenses? I can't imagine because a hologram needs light to be a hologram. But if you made a hologram of a lens and shine light through it, I don't know. We're really reaching here. That's the kind of thing that, you need to be a little bit high to kind of appreciate or think about. Yes, they're trying to force you to purchase their expensive lenses. There was a firmware hack a few years ago for one of the M5 models that allowed focus stacking with any. Ooh. So the cripple hammer. Interesting. I think I've seen that. I saw that somewhere on the Micro Four Thirds forum where somebody was doing firmware updates, eliminating like the record limits, and I wouldn't be surprised if the focus stacking wasn't one of them. But it'd have to be one of the newer cameras because focus stacking wasn't available, I think, until the Mark III. But don't quote me on that. Oh, thanks, Ralph, for an awesome streaming. Y'all have a great day. And oh my goodness. All right, Darko, we'll see you later. What time is it? 11:46. So I've been at this 2.5 hours. All right. I think as good a time as any to call it, unless anybody had any other questions. So I'll just give it a minute. But thanks everyone for being here. I really appreciate it. Listening to me jibber jabber. And like I said, everything I said in this stream, you have to double check, man, because I could be 100% wrong. Particularly when I was talking about lenses and pixel pitch and all those technical things, because I'm not an engineer by any means. I'm just an enthusiast like you guys. And when I see specs, I want to understand why something is what it is. Because there's so much crap being thrown around the internet and you hear things, and you're like, okay, and then you start to think it's true. And it's like, wait a minute, I got to research this for myself. Why would they say such a thing? Saying that full frame sensors get 4 times as much light, it's implying that that's why it's getting better image quality. That's not why, because the amount of light per square centimeter is exactly the same, regardless of sensor size. But it is technically getting 4 times more light because it has to spread it across a larger surface area. But I could be wrong on that. Don't take my word for it. Do your own research. But that's from what I understand now about how all this stuff works. That's what I believe is happening. But all right, you guys are awesome. As always, thanks for being here. If you can support my channels, I have the donation or coffee links down below. I also have my new Amazon shop where I try to find good deals for you guys. So bookmark my Amazon shop. I'll probably start adding like once or twice a month a shopping stream. Seems like you guys enjoy that too. So look for that. But I'm definitely going to do a photo editing stream this week. I got to double check my calendar and I'll put that up for you guys to start submitting your images. We'll see you again, God willing, next week. Thanks. And everyone have a great week.